I welcome again anybody and everybody who ever listens to this recording. Today's topic is going to be one which we have already sung about, and today we are going to give an in-depth commentary, we might say, to the same song, namely the Nirvana Shatakam. Now, for you to also keep track on what we speak of, there will be a link in the description for the Sanskrit and English translation of this song. So be sure that you check it out as well. Now, to give a little background about this Nirvana Shatakam, it was in fact composed by Adi Shankaracharya in the 8th, 9th century BC. And it is in fact a conclusion. It is a very short poem, a very short Shatakam, in fact, but it describes the teachings of absolute non-dualism, the experience of absolute non-dualism, what is the final goal, which has to be eliminated. And in fact, in this Nirvana Shatakam, he expresses all the truths of absolute non-dualism in not more than 6 stanzas or strophes. And today we shall take a look at this. As an act of reverence, we will say first the Sanskrit stanza, and then we will say the English, and we will give the commentary to that. Now, Nirvana Shatakam, what does the title mean? Nirvana, it is the same word nirvana that the Buddha spoke of as the highest possible experience and the goal of all spiritual seeking, which in fact means to blow out, to quench. And you know, what is quenched and blown out? We might say all the feathers, or the hindrances, all that is not the final reality. And Shatakam, the word Shatakam means a piece of literature, a piece of art. Normally, they refer to something as a Shatakam when there are 100 strophes or verses, but here it is given just as the sense that it is a piece of art. So it is a piece of art about nirvana. So let us just dig into it without any further information about the circumstances it was created on. So the very first stanza, mano buddhi ahankara chittani naaham, nacha shrotravjihve, nacha ghraana netre, nacha vyoma bhumir, na tejo na vaayuhu, chidananda rupah, shivo'ham, shivo'ham. And this in English means, I am not the mind, the intellect, the ego, or the memory. I am not the ears, the skin, the nose, or the eyes. I am not space, not earth, not fire, water, or wind. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. So we shall see throughout the art, this piece of art, that this last verse, chidananda rupah shivo'ham, shivo'ham, which stands for I am the form of consciousness and bliss, I am the eternal Shiva, repeats itself at the end of all of the strophes. It is in fact a constant reminder, because we shall see that all the beginnings of the stanzas are negations. I am not this, not that, not that, not that. And as you know, then the disciple might ask, okay, I understand that you eliminated what you are not. And then tell me with a positive expression, what is it that is the ultimate? And then there's always this positive description, I'm the form of consciousness and bliss, I am the eternal Shiva. So we shall see this throughout. And another thing that we will see is in fact that at the beginning we speak about very gross experiences like the mind, the intellect, the ego, the memory, and we shall see as we go further and further that they become subtler and subtler, and at the end everything is removed that is not oneself. So let us dig deep into the first stanza. I am not the mind, the intellect, the ego, or the memory. Now, to understand this clearly, we have to speak about what the mind is. In English, there is this one word, mind, which should mean everything that a human being experiences itself to be. So the mind has 4 elements, in fact. So what we call mind is, in fact, 4 things. That is intellect, memory, identity, and intelligence. So if we look at this very first verse, which says, I am not the mind, then we give a more precise description, the intellect, the ego, or the memory. Sometimes identity and ego are said as synonyms, so this is how it appears here. Now, it's interesting because in this part, out of the 4 intellect, memory, ego, or identity, and intelligence, only 3 of them are spoken of, namely the intellect, the ego, and the memory. Now, let us first look at how these things are interconnected and why is that the intelligence part is not written here. And obviously, we already have the assumption that certainly the intelligence is that which is positively expressed in a way at the ends of all of the stanzas, all of the strophes. So, intellect, what we refer to as intellect, is simply that we can discriminate things, that we can think logically. These are in fact all just brain functions, to know how things work, to discern this is how it's okay, this is how it's not okay for survival. So in fact, intellect is survival. It is what is in our brain. Then we have the memory, which is in fact manifold, because we might have memory of this lifetime, like I remember having done that. Then there are memories of previous lifetimes. Then there's a memory of our ancestors as well, like it is in our DNA. So obviously it is a memory in us. And this is why many times there are practices towards the ancestors and purifying the connections with our ancestors so that this memory doesn't hold us back. And there are other kinds of memory, such as the body memory, namely that the body knows how to digest, the body knows how to grow by itself. It is also in a way in our DNA, but it's different, of course, from the ancestral, because even without ancestors, the body would know in a way what to do. Of course, it is just an assumption, but the point is that there is a manifold memory within us. Then there is the identity, which is in fact, in a way, that the intellect and the memory get married, and then there is an identity, because what identity is a lot of memory, in fact, because what we think that we are is what we remember ourselves to be, nothing else in reality. And what does the intellect to do with the memory and the identity is simply the fact that our intellect wants to defend this identity no matter what. So whenever somebody takes an identity, they justify everything by, like, with their logic, like saying that this is who I am and this is why I am this and this is why I cannot be anything else. And we can feel that it's so justified that people do all many things that are connected to identity, but it is just basically the intellect defending that created identity, which comes in fact from memory. So these 3 things, intellect, memory, and identity, are in fact hands in hand, and this is how they work. Now, in the contrast, intelligence is that thing which is beyond all these three components. Because, for example, gravity is intelligence in a way, because it knows how to work, but it doesn't know how to work out of memory, because gravity doesn't have memory. It just happens to be so. Light also knows how it interacts with matter, for example, not because it has a memory that he says, oh yeah, do you remember, this is how we shall pass through different materials. No, it is an intelligence. It means that it knows, but it doesn't know out of a memory or identity. It just happens to be. Also that we move around the sun, it is also a kind of intelligent force, that it is not a memory, because whenever you put, if I take another planet and I put it close to the sun, it starts to also move in circles. So it always happens like that. It is nothing personal. It's an impersonal reality intelligence. And this is the fourth part of what we call the mind. And this is why they say that the mind in its original form is enlightened, because it's pure intelligence. Pure intelligence is not, there are no hindrances in it. There are no impurities in it, such as memory. Because memory is always an impurity in the sense that it binds you, that you will, there is this thing that keeps coming again and again, and then you might not be able to do other things because of your memory that might, for example, mean trauma, or because of the good experiences you want to do something again, which in fact might not be something that supports your journey. For example, greed sometimes might feel as very joyful, but it does not mean that one should continue doing so. So intelligence, this is why it's not said in this triple elements of the mind, namely the intellect, ego, and memory. And in fact, when it says, I am the form of consciousness and bliss, I am the eternal Shiva, intellect is implicitly expressed here, because both consciousness and bliss are, you know, in a way connected to intelligence, because they just work by the nature of theirs. There is no memory of how consciousness should work. If you do the right practice, you will raise your consciousness, because this is how intelligence is. This is why it is not written in this very first verse. Now going on, I am not the ears, the skin, the nose, or the eyes. Here simply Shankara refers to the thing that in order to understand what the self means, Brahman means, we have to realize that all these sensual things that we experience is not really real, because as we spoke about it in the video of yesterday, for example, about desires which can come in the ears as, you know, desire for a sound, to the skin as a desire for a touch, for a certain material, the nose as the desire to smell something, and the desire going to the eyes is the desire of wanting to see something. And because we know that desires by themselves aren't really real, right now we even remove that we would be the ear. Simply when we speak, for example, about the witness, that if we are the witness, we are not the ones who do things or experience things, we are the ones who witness the body having all these functions going on. And here when he says that I'm not the ears, the skin, the nose, or the eyes, number one, it says that there are no desires in me. This is one thing that is said implicitly. And the other is that all these functions that the body hears, touches, smells, sees, these are also just things that we witness. We are the witness of all these functions that go on in the body, and these things go inevitably in the body. And the best thing that we can do while witnessing this body is to just really stay the witness and not get entangled in the five sense doors. Then the next line is, I am not space, not earth, not fire, water, or wind. Now, let's speak about the four elements first, and then we speak about space as well. So earth, fire, water, and wind. So these are seen as the four elements, the very four elements of existence. Now, you know, if a scientist comes, they will say, what nonsense is this? You say like water, but in water there are a lot of things. Like, for example, there's calcium, there are minerals there. If you say wind, there is nitrogen, there's oxygen, there's hydrogen, there are noble gases. How do you say that these are so elementary? In fact, we have to understand that, you know, these four elements are not to be understood. They are understood more metaphorically. For example, if you look at the body, and if you want to identify these four elements, the earth will be the gross, the very powerful, like the flesh, the bones. That would be the earth element in our body. The fire can be understood as the heat or the temperature of the body, or any kind of body, in fact. The wind, for example, in the body, they say that there are 5 types of winds that are, for example, those that so they are connected to prana, and that is the wind, we might say, which, you know, help us see, because through prana, because there's prana, we can see, we can touch, that we can digest, that our metabolic system happens. These are the winds in our body. Sometimes they refer to these like vaayuhu, 5 types of winds. And then the water would be, in fact, the liquids, those things that move faster than the earth, like the gross parts, but they are still not as fast as the winds, that those metabolic systems that are, you know, they are they go on in the cells. And waters are simply the cool things, those that just move in the body, the blood, all the kinds of watery substances that we have. And, you know, then he says that I'm not the 4 elements, simply saying that these 4 things, earth, fire, water, and wind, belong to the body and ultimately to this world, which means that I cannot be that, because as I am the witness just witnesses the earth, the fire, the water, or wind, but it does not get entangled in all of these things. It sees it for what it is. And there is the interesting part, as that of space. Now, space can be understood in several ways. Now, if you speak about space as just simply the space that we have between things, we might say, of course, that space is omnipresent. But at the same time, space is also some manifested reality. We, of course, are not able to have it as a material reality, like we cannot touch space, because it's just, we are also in space, and space is within us as well. But this is still something manifested. So even this world is based on space. There's a whole empty space, and there are manifestations, grosser manifestations, as the stars, the planets, on the planets, different bodies, objects. And space, for example, when we speak about infinite space, you know, why is it that we cannot be the infinite space? Is that if we can have the experience, as long as we can have the experience of witnessing something, it means that we can just detach ourselves from that thing and not be it. As long as you can witness something and you can go beyond that by simply witnessing it, you cannot say that you are, because it means that you could go beyond that. Certainly you are not that. For example, if we speak about certain stages of consciousnesses that the Buddha, for example, spoke about, those are the 8 jhanas of Buddhism. So I will give just the list very quickly and I will get to the point. So the very first state is delightful sensation in the body, that you feel well. For example, after a long day, you sit down and there is this delightful sensation in the body that you are so without energy, and right now you can just rest a bit. Then the next one is joy, that you feel that you're happy because something is going on. There you can be just joyful. Simply this is what it means. Then the third one would be contentment, which simply means that you are well with what is going on or what is not going on. You are just well with things. Then the fourth jhana is utter peacefulness. It is like you're not disturbed by things. You start to get equanimous. This is what it means. Then there are the four types of other jhanas, which is the fifth one in our list: infinite space, infinite consciousness, no thingness, neither perception nor non-perception. And what I wanted to refer to right now is that there is the experience of infinite space. And when we experience infinite space, then we might say, well, this is infinite space and I experience this infinite space. Can I say that that is really it? Even though it's omnipresent, it still has manifestation to it. And because, for example, the next jhana, which is considered a higher jhana, is infinite consciousness, which it means that we can go even beyond infinite space and see something beyond that, that this infinite space is infinite consciousness in infinite space. But then even we can go beyond, which is nothingness, which simply means that we realize that even this consciousness is just a big emptiness, that even space is just a big emptiness. The neither perception nor non-perception is just simply that there is such a deep concentration that such things that perceiving and non-perceiving just do not even arise in the mind. And then there is a ninth one that sometimes is said, sometimes isn't, which is cessation, which is like completely blown out, completely quenched, that you realize that everything just falls into a complete shunyata, like completely going there. So here, when we say I'm not space, it is simply to know that even though it's infinite, we can witness it, and then it means that we can go beyond it, and then we give the reasoning to it. We get it, in fact, I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. Now, here, we know that neither consciousness nor bliss do have a form. And still he says, I am the form of consciousness and bliss. In fact, the reason why he says it so is to simply realize that even if you right now have a form, you can still know that it is reality. In reality, this is consciousness that is just pure consciousness. As we said, neither perception nor non-perception. There are no objects. There's a nothingness. We know that in fact it's infinite, but it's completely empty. And here he says that even, number one, when there is this form, even then I am consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. But beyond that because people are so attached to forms, we say that you see even the forms as consciousness and bliss, and then you slowly start to move away from the need to such form, to feel that you are a form. And then, why is it consciousness and bliss? Why does he say it like that? It is simply because the ultimate reality is seen as these three things. As we said, Sat Chitananda, which means existence, consciousness, bliss. And when he says I am, it's obviously it denotes existence. And then saying that consciousness and bliss, it just simply expresses the whole three parts, which are really just one thing. And then he says, I am the eternal Shiva. Now, let us just speak about this a bit, because as it keeps coming back at the end of all the stanzas, it is good to know that it means, in fact, the same thing at the end of all the stanzas. So, Shiva, we know that he was that being who was here around 15,000 years ago, who is known as Adi Yogi, or the very first yogi. And we say that many times, almost all the times, when a great being comes and becomes perfectly enlightened, they create out of themselves an infinite form. It simply means that even after 15,000 years later, you can still get in touch with them. It simply means that you can still feel their energies, you can still become their energies, because they created out of themselves an infinite form, an eternal form, which means that it is always there and it will not cease to be. And this is why he says, I am the eternal Shiva. Shiva, in fact, means the word that which is not, that which is beyond any kind of bondage or object. As we said, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception or cessation, these things are also just steps closer and closer to the state of Shiva, which is simply absolute dissolution. When everything becomes so dissolved that you cannot find anything there. Like really, not because Shiva doesn't exist, but because its existence is so transcendental that you simply cannot find there a mental object or a physical object. And then he says that I know that I am that reality which is beyond changes, which is absolute dissolution, where there is in fact no manifestation of anything. I am, with other words, I am the witness, because the absolute nothingness, it is just like a witness. Like many things might happen in the manifested reality, but the nothingness, the emptiness, doesn't change. It just simply witnesses itself. It just witnesses, but there are no changes in it. This is in fact consciousness and bliss, which pure consciousness doesn't change. It is just pure awareness. And the bliss is the same, like when there's only great bliss, you can simply just imagine and visualize that when there's a great bliss, then all these things, if I am this or I am not this, they just go away. And you simply are aware of existence, not existence of this form or this body or that body, just simply existence as it is, or just simply consciousness, that even this consciousness that I have, this awareness, the same consciousness in all beings. The bliss that I can experience is the same bliss that other beings experience. And then this is why they say that reality is ultimately oneness, because the experience says so. So this is in fact the first stanza that removes the gross elements of the mind and the body, and that which is the body is made of, the four elements, and space which is all around, in fact. If we go to the next one, which is nachak prana sangyo nave pancha vaayuhu, nava sapta dhatur nava pancha koshah, navak pani-padam na chopastha, chidananda rupah shivo'ham. And in English, I am not the breath, nor the five elements. I am not matter, nor the five sheets of consciousness, nor am I the speech, the hands, or the feet. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. So, right now, in fact, we get a little summary of what has been said before. I'm not the breath, nor the five elements. So as we spoke about it, the breath is understood as many things. The breath that we take, this is the one meaning, that we take the breath, but also those types of winds in the body that create, that make the digestion, that by which all these body functions happen. Even that we can see is in a way, it's a kind of breath in the body. It's a kind of prana that does that thing in the body. And because, again, I'm not all these things, because these things are ever changing. And the same is with the four elements. In fact, five elements, speaking about space, air, earth, fire, water, and wind. Because we know from experience that all these things change. We cannot be those things if we, in fact, it is not about an identity, because when he says, I'm the eternal Shiva, it is not to be understood as an identity. It has to be understood as an experiential and existential reality, that because only this transcendent reality exists, this small existence cannot be different. And when he says that I am the eternal Shiva, he simply says that because everything is the absolute, this small being, this small consciousness, simply cannot be different based on the experience of non-duality. And this is why he says that I am not the breath nor the five elements, because these always change. You know, the earth, like the gross parts of our body. We cut our hair, we cut our nails. So everything is just changing constantly. And if we say that we are constantly changing things, there is no peace, let alone liberation, because then when something ceases, then we would suffer because it ceased to exist and we thought that we are dead. And when it is gone, we still feel that we are, but we feel that what we are is no longer. And then there is a suffering. For example, with the body. Many times when somebody that is close to us gets ill, they immediately feel very bad because we identified them with the body, and the body, we see that is soon to go. So instead we could know that those beings are also the absolute, and ultimately there is no difference, but because of the five elements that trick us, this is Maya, in fact, that we are tricked by our own experiences of duality. We think that, you know, we are the five elements and the breath, but because there are beings, even when we speak about breath as just the breath that we take to our nose, even that, because when we leave the body, certainly we don't breathe as such because we have left the material plane. And still, you know, that there is still existence going on. A rock might not breathe, but it doesn't mean that it is not existent in that sense. So knowing that beyond the breath, there's, for example, the experience of the breathlessness that they speak of, which would be, you know, a stepping stone on the path, because then it means that the mind is so calm that breath doesn't happen. It means that there's very small karma that we might be creating. And, you know, in the breathlessness, they say that in that stage of breathlessness, even enlightenment can be found. In fact, between two breaths, there's also breathlessness, so it is always there. It is just that we are not aware of it. Then the next line says, I am not matter, nor the five sheets of consciousness. Now, we shall speak about what these five sheets of consciousness are, but we shall see that he says, I am not matter, nor the five sheets of consciousness. This is so because the five sheets of consciousness, and so matter is very gross, and then the five sheets of consciousness are subtler and subtler and subtler. So the five sheets of consciousness are food, sheet, energy, mind, discernment, and bliss. Now, in fact, these were categorized in other ways as physical body, astral body, and causal body. So in these sheets of consciousness, the food would be the simple physical body. This is what this sheet is. And again, we know that this is all ever changing because the hair grows, the nails grow, even the body grows or starts to lose from itself. So certainly, as this is not existential, because it comes and it will go at some point, we cannot say that we are, because consciousness is beyond it, and as this is not pure consciousness, that the true self cannot be. Then the sheets of energy, mind, and discernment are normally called the astral body. So energy, and with other words, this is the prana, which again we spoke about the prana as this vital force that holds together, which makes the body function as it is. So there is this prana which at the end of the life, you know, in steps leaves the body. And because there's a movement that it comes and goes and comes and goes, it means that it always changes. Like it is not something that is always like that. Things that do not change can be called eternal and free, absolutely free. Those things that move sometimes are captive, sometimes they seem to be free, So this is why we say that these things we cannot be, because even these things we can witness. Because right now I might experience that I see, or I'm moving my hand. But the moment when I start to just witness the motion of the hand, I immediately see that I'm not the food body, because I can witness it. It means that I see it from outside, and not even the energy body, because I can witness the energy in the body. Then they call the next one mind sheet. Now again, because all the intellect, the discrimination or discernment, identities, all these things in fact come from the astral body, and just this physical body adds to it even more. For example, these ones, the mind and discernment is discrimination, which means that I take something and I take another thing and I say that they are different. I discriminate them on some kind of basis, on, I don't know, size, on manifestation, or certain other aspects. And so all these sheets are, in fact, what doesn't happen in the physical body itself, but it always has, of course, a manifestation in the physical body. So this is why he says that I am not these, because these all are certain bodies which, so they say, for example, that the pure awareness is free from any kind of body, any kind of sheet, any kind of manifestation. And all these bodies, all these sheets are in fact locking away the experience of omnipresence, that there is a freedom which is like keep expanding and expanding. Just one 1 minute, please. I have to drink a bit of water. So, because they keep changing, and because there is this always kept, we feel that we are kept in these bodies, in these sheets, and it simply cannot give us freedom, because there are always these sheets. If there's something omnipresent and then you put part of it into a body, then it will experience itself as not absolutely free, because it will experience itself as kept in a body. And these are why these 5 sheets, you see that it becomes subtler and subtler. Food, energy, mind, discernment, they start to become very subtle. And the last kind of sheet is called Anandamaya koshah, which means bliss sheet. It simply means that this body is sometimes in fact called the causal body. This simply means that there is a body which is made out of bliss. And then you might ask, then why is it a problem? The problem is that bliss is still kept as a body. It is seen as a manifested body, rather than just bliss expanding in infinite dimensions, and it is seen as just a body. It can be very blissful, of course, and we want to have bliss, but it does not have to be connected with a sheet, with a body which, even when we feel very blissful in the body, so they say that no matter what great enlightenment we get in this body, as long as there is this body, we are not completely free. Because yes, we know that we are not the body, but every morning when we wake up, we feel that this body has woken up, which means that in fact we witness this body more than other bodies. And this is why they say that the greatest samadhis of nirvikalpa samadhi and the rest are very great experiences, but the greatest thing in them is that you distance yourself from the body, of any kind of body. And when only this bliss sheet is left, then we can take a next step, when it is just bliss, existence, consciousness, bliss, without any kind of sheet. So this is why he says, I am not the matter, nor the 5 sheets of consciousness, because consciousness is kept in these sheets as if they were real. But in fact, these are like hallucinations that I keep constantly creating the impression for myself that I'm the body. if we could just simply take this experience and do not create this impression that we are the body, slowly we would leave the form. We would leave this plane of existence. This is what would happen. Now going to the next line of this stanza, nor am I the speech, the hands, or the feet. And again, this is a reminder again that we might feel that we are speaking, but at the same time we can create a state of consciousness when we just witness the speech happening, because the mindset of doership and that of the witness are exclusive. You cannot feel that you are the doer and that you are the witness at the same time. If you do feel that at the same time, it means that you jump from one to the other one very quickly, and then it seems to be the same, but in fact these are two different mindsets. When you feel that you're speaking, you feel that you are making up the thought and that it appears as a word, as a sentence. Rather than this, if you speak about intelligence that was spoken of at the very beginning, we can just let even the speech happen as it should happen, like naturally, without memory, just speaking of things as they have to be spoken of, like not coming with our identities and intellects and mind memories and just saying, oh, this is what I think. Just simply let things be spoken of. It's like letting dharma or the reality just be expressed by this body as we witness its happenings. And why this is important is in fact expressed in karma yoga, or the path of action, that as long as we feel that we are the doer, we feel that we are the experiencer, and that what we experience is reality. So for example, as they many times say, you have no right for the fruit of the action, which simply means that if there is something to be done, you should not be distracted by what are going to be the conclusions. If it's really something that has to be done, if the conclusions are great for you or torturous, you still have to do it if it is something that is to be done. And if you're the witness, you do things effortlessly without any kind of doubt. But if you feel that you're the doer, you also feel that you're the sufferer. And you know, even if the body suffers, it doesn't mean that you have to suffer. You can even witness just the functions of suffering in the body. Nobody has ever said to really feel that suffering. And this is why this witness, that even if I do something, just feel that I'm not the one who is speaking, but I'm the one who makes the speech possible. I'm not the one who breathes. I'm the one who makes the breath possible. And if we look at ourselves and we dig deeper and we just go deeper into this experience, then when the breath stops or when anything stops, we don't feel that we were taken away something from us, that there was something taken away from us. We simply feel that something has fulfilled its needs, and then everything goes on. So when he says, I am not the speech, the hands, or the feet, it simply means that all the things that happen with the body or the mind, we can just witness those as just functions. We don't have to get entangled in their mechanisms. And again, after negating all those things, we get a positive affirmation. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva, which again is a reminder that I'm not all those things, but I know that there is an ultimate reality, and because I am also awareness, I cannot be simply different from it. Then going to the next stanza, na me dvesha rago, na me loba moha, na me ve mado neva matsarya bhava, na dharmo, na charto, na kamo, na moksha, chidananda rupah shivo'ham shivo'ham. In English, there is no like or dislike in me, no greed or delusion. I know not pride or jealousy. I have no duty, no desire for wealth, lust or liberation. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. Now, let us just start with the very first one. There is no like or dislike in me, no greed or delusion. I know not pride or jealousy. So, like and dislike. So at the beginning we spoke about identities, which are very powerful things like this is what I am, this is who I am, and you have to accept this. Right now, these are also, in a way, these identities that I like this, I don't like that. This is also just part of our memory and our identity. So, for example, if we speak about likes and dislikes, I just want to prove that they are very superficial. Let's say that there is a big desire, a big like for a certain food, okay? And let's say that there is a kind of pizza that you like a lot. And let's say that I bring you this pizza and I put it in front of you. You're not allowed to eat from it. And I will tell you, just look at that pizza for half an hour without getting distracted by other things. Just breathe and look at the pizza. And you will say, okay, at the beginning you might have this craving, this passion that I would love to take that bite. But as time passes and passes and you just witness it, at some point you will tell me, I'm not even sure if I really like it. I became neutral with it. This is what your experience will be. The same would be with dislikes. Let's say, and I will give a very powerful example, I bring here a corpse, a dead body. Many people will be like, ew, what did you, have you just brought here? And I will tell you, just witness, just see and just see it for what it is. And at the beginning you might have this dislike and this unpleasant situation, like why am I even doing this? But then you will slowly see it and you will say it's like it is just matter. It is just like any kind of other objects in the world. And slowly your dislike will become neutrality. So at the beginning, in the very beginning, we have to understand that our likes and dislikes come from memory, because you like that being, but it is also because you have a memory with them which is present. Dislike something, you have a memory that is not present to think of, and this is what our likes and dislikes mean. But these are also superficial, as we have just seen with the examples. And then he says, there is no like or dislike in me. If you don't like or dislike anything, it means that you're equanimous, that you are just not bothered by likes and dislikes. You realize that all these things that come and might impress us and be in our like, or not impress us and then we dislike them, just come and go. In previous lives you might have loved that being. Right now you cannot even stand them. Now how can you say that that is an existential reality? Well, it is not. And this is why he says there is no like or dislike in me, because this would be impurities, hindrances. And because I am equanimous, I am not touched by these things, I witness how things happen, then why would I have to have any kind of liking or not liking towards something? If I know everything for what it is, then why should I like things or dislike things? Those are just things. I don't have to have a mental attitude towards them. And right now we get another very beautiful part. No greed or delusion, I know not pride or jealousy. Now, in fact, greed and delusion are two kinds of roots out of the three. And in fact, the third one is implicit in the next line, I know not pride or jealousy. So the three roots, unwholesome roots that make us suffer, are greed, hatred, and delusion. And right now, he in fact just expresses the three roots. No greeds. Greeds, we know what it means, that there is this craving for more, for wanting more. Hatred, in fact, again, as I said, it's implicit in I know not pride or jealousy, because jealousy is in fact a kind of annoyance and aversion, and both annoyance and aversion are rooted in the root of hate. So this is what he says there, and delusion is simply not knowing something, and it is unwholesome because there is a lack of wisdom. It means that its conclusions, its consequences are also unwholesome because there's a not knowing of things. If there's a not knowing of things, certainly the consequence of those not known things are also not known. So here he just simply says, and if you look at this, here we speak about very fine things, likes and dislikes, greed, delusion. These are the states of consciousnesses, because at the beginning he spoke about very powerful things as the body, as the 5 elements. Here we already touch subtler parts. And then he says, I have no duty, no desire for wealth, for lust, or for liberation. Now, I have no duty. The word duty is in Sanskrit dharma. Now, dharma means, in fact, many things. Dharma, in one hand, means truth, the way things are. And the other meaning of dharma is duty. Those things that one has to perform in order to get to liberation. So here are 2 things to be spoken of. Number 1, about this duty. As long as one is not enlightened, one does not rejoice in the self, one has to perform certain duties towards the world, because, as we would say, there's a reason why we are here, so we perform these duties. So, for example, how Krishna spoke about this in the Bhagavad Gita is that for one who has attained the self, who rejoices exclusively in the self, for such a being there is no more duty to be performed, because all our duties ultimately have to bring us to our liberation. It simply means, if I feel that I have to get married, I do it in the vision of liberation. If I want to take on a certain job, I also do it being conscious of liberation. So all the things that I do that are my duties, for example, simply that I might be, for example, a student, and then my duty is to learn. Even if I do this learning, all my actions are focused on liberation, then at some point when liberation is really attained, enlightenment is attained, then there are no more duties, because whatever you do, there's nothing that you could gain or lose. For example, as Krishna said, there's nothing that I haven't experienced, and yet I still work, because this is, for example, and right now I'm paraphrasing it, this is a good example for the coming generations, that even if you have attained enlightenment, it means that your actions do not create any more karma. This is one thing that it means. So it means that you can perform apparent duties, but it is for the sake of the liberation of all. So ultimately there is no duty, because everything has reached this conclusion, its goal, its destination, and it's important to know that we should not mistake the means and the goal. Because many times what we do is that we have a tool and there's the goal. And sometimes we think that the tool is the goal and the goal is the tool. For example, when people do prayer, they think that the goal is to pray, and then the tool is to pray with our faith or whatever. But in fact, the tool is the prayer, for example, and the goal should be even then, or an enlightenment. But there are, again, no duties for someone who has attained the self. There cannot be any kind of duties. So his duties will be, in a way, to speak of no duty. Now he goes on with saying, no desire for wealth, lust, or liberation. Now, in fact, it's very interesting. This is one of the very controversial, contradictorial parts that we might assume that are contradictorial, but they are really not. So I have no desire for wealth and lust. It simply means that I know that me being the witness of all the functions and just the word, if I have wealth, meaning money or animals or whatever, I know that I don't gain anything, because that which is just beyond just witnessing everything as just a pure awareness, as a mindfulness, then if I have wealth or I don't have wealth, it doesn't make a difference. Both wealth and lust make difference for the body, but it doesn't make difference in any greater reality. Lust, it doesn't have to be understood as just lust for sexuality. If lust is understood as passion towards something, for example, lust for a kind of food or a kind of touch, these are all just all kinds of lust, which simply means that things that create a craving within us, that is lust. So these wealth and lust are understood because even if you speak about lust as sexual, if somebody is the witness, it simply means that we just witness all these functions in the body, but we know that we are not that. So why would I desire something which in fact doesn't make a difference for us? I have no desire for liberation. Now this is very interesting. Why is that, desire for liberation is something that he says that should be avoided and that we shouldn't touch that? The reason is because if I desire to get, let's say that I have this statement, I desire so much to get liberated. Or that is very good that I want to go towards liberation. But the problem is that I think that just because I desire it, that I want it so bad, makes a difference. But it doesn't make a difference. As long as I don't practice, as long as I don't understand, I might desire something or I might not desire something. It simply does not make a difference. Because it means that I'm the same kind of fool if I desire liberation, if I don't desire liberation, because the same way fool because I still haven't made an attempt to get beyond myself, even in small percentages, to get beyond myself. And therefore, there's no need for liberation, for a desire for liberation. Future, we will see that this desire for liberation cannot even arise, because if something is ever free, which means that it doesn't know what bondage is, then why would it desire to be free? For example, a bird that has never been kept in a cage, and you ask that bird, how do you find being free? And that bird will ask you, I mean, how else could I be? When there has never been bondage, then why would I even think of liberation? Bondage and liberation are relative to each other. But if something is absolutely free, then there cannot even be an idea of not being free, because this is the simply transcending duality. If something is ever free, then why would even the idea of bondage arise? It wouldn't. And again, we have the closing reminder, I am the form of consciousness and bliss, I am the eternal Shiva, which again means the same thing that was expressed before. Now, the next one, the next stanza, na punyam, na papam, na sokyam, na dukkham, na mantro, na tritam, na veda, na yajna, aham bojanam neva bojam na bhokta, chidananda rupah shivo'ham shivo'ham. In English, it means no virtue or vice, no pleasure or pain. I need no mantras, no pilgrimage, no scriptures or rituals. I am not the experienced, nor the experience itself. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. Now we go towards other kinds of dualities, vice and virtue, pleasure and pain. And now he says, no virtue or vice. And then it again seems to be illogical. Like many beings tell us we should have a virtuous life, that we should create good karma to us. And this is true. But the point is that I think that I'm a virtuous man. I might look at other beings as vices that they don't, because most of the times good people think that they are the best and that they are so good. And then we enter the duality, I'm so good, all these other people are so bad. And this is again relative to what I assume is to be good and to be bad. And therefore he says no virtue or vice. It simply means that as I am witnessing everything, that ultimately I do not move, I do not eat, I do not speak, how can something that is empty and just witnessing things have virtue or vice? Uh, you know, Speaking of virtue, uh, as they say, a Buddha does not do evil, but certainly doesn't do good either, which simply means that virtue and vice are those happenings that describe those things that create for us good karma or bad karma. Good karma being those things that give us purity, bad karma is that which creates unwholesome situations and consciousnesses within us. So he says that I have neither good karma nor bad karma. I do not need karma because I am free. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. That I do not need good and bad karma because these karmas are needed in order to get to the point when there is no more karma. Even duties exist not to exist. Karma exists not to exist, not to exist. So, by this understanding, he says no virtue or vice, that there is no such thing in me. I do not do bad, certainly I do not do good, because these are just relative. I do things as they are meant to be done. I do not need to speak of them as good or bad. I do things as they have to be done, without any kind of thinking like, oh, is it good, is it bad, and going into philosophies. I do as it is meant to be done. No pleasure or pain. Again, pleasure and pain are relative to each other, and therefore they cannot be absolutely real because they may change very quickly. Right now I might feel pleasure in pleasure, but the next moment it might turn into pain. And because they are very quickly changing and they come and go, these are not equanimous. Many times we think that the counterpart of pleasure is pain, but no, it's equanimity. Because if you want to go beyond pleasure, you don't go to pain. You have to go towards neutrality. That if something beautiful happens, you don't have to be so, yeah, it happened and I'm so happy that it happened. Because if you get entangled in it and it gets lost, then you are not happy that it got lost. And again, the counterpart for pain is not pleasure. It's again neutrality, because if you want to go beyond pain, you have to be equanimous, that you're not moved by these things. And when you're not moved by pleasure or pain, as Krishna would say, that you take everything neutrally, like you're not moved by it, you're not moved by the outside. Because both pleasure or pain, whether physical or mental, are essentially coming from the outside, or somehow from the outside it got within us as a reaction, for example. But to really go be blissful, it means that you don't want to have good times and bad times, namely pleasures and pains. You're just blissful. Even if your body is tormented, you can be blissful. So for example, the Buddha said that even if people come to cut down your 2 legs and 2 arms, you should not have aversion towards them. It simply means that you should still be insidely blissful, that you're not moved because you know that anyway the body would go. If it goes now or it goes 10,000 years later, what's the difference? You just stay blissful because that certainly cannot be taken away. Then I need no mantras, no pilgrimage, no scriptures or rituals. Now, in fact, these are the things that create a lot of identity and a lot of clinging. For example, out of these 4, namely mantra, pilgrimage, scripture, and ritual, the last 3, pilgrimages, scriptures, and rituals, slowly, if we do, rituals without the understanding of what a ritual is meant for, then we will think that, oh, this ritual is so important. Without this ritual, I'm not even going to get enlightened. And of course, we have a very beautiful example of a being who got enlightened without scriptures and rituals and mantras and pilgrimages, which is namely Gautama Siddhartha, who did get enlightened without the use of all these. So in order to disprove all of these, for example, scriptures, Adi Shankara himself, who wrote this, says, if you know reality, the reading of scriptures has no meaning, because if you really know it, then why would you even need to read scriptures? If you don't know the real nature of things, then reading scripture is also fruitless, because you cannot understand it. So if you have the experience, you don't need it. If you don't have the experience, you don't need it. So scriptures seem to be rather just there. And of course, right now I'm not saying that scriptures have to be burned up from the beginning to the end. What I mean is that simply scriptures can give us a certain direction. After we had the experience, we might check what another being had said about that certain experience. For example, infinite space, like what is it? Have I actually experienced it? Or what is it, for example? Which is, again, we shall speak about those things another time. Rituals, now, as I always give this good example, how many times do we cremate a dead body? Once and well. We don't cremate a body several times. And this is the same with rituals. There are certain rituals that are unavoidably performed, but they don't have to be ritualistic. If you understand why we do it, then it's very good. For example, there's this ritual of food, like we have to eat food 3 times a day. When it's the second meal, we have to have a soup and something else. This became a ritual because I might ask, why cannot I just eat twice a day in the afternoon, in the hours 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. and be well? No, because this is how we do it. And it became a ritual because we no longer have the understanding of how much food we need. We just eat because even our ancestors did so. So why would we do differently? Then the pilgrimage, many people have so many emotions about places, like, oh, this place is so holy, but you miss the whole point that the holy being goes to a holy place. So, instead of going on by knowing that this body is in a way the vehicle of the absolute, of the divine, then why would I need pilgrimages to go to and feel that that is so sacred? Many times, pilgrimages are really not always sacred, but because we think that they are, we go there and we feel better. But what we simply do is that we enhance our emotions. We create beautiful emotions, because this is a sad reality that we cannot create beautiful emotions out of ourselves. We always need an object for it. And pilgrimage is just the same kind of object. You might eat the pizza, or you can go to the pilgrimage. If it gives you the same kind of happy feeling, then what's the difference? And mantras, mantras are used to grasp certain realities. One point is to give a distraction for the mind so that, it can just concentrate on the mantra. And in the meantime, we can work on ourselves without the mind coming and, throwing different thoughts or emotions. But, as mantras are used for going into other deeper realities, to see deeper realities, the moment you can just know anything in the 10th of a moment, then you don't need any more mantras, because again, these are tools. Mantras are not the goal. Just because there are people who sing mantras day and night, but they don't get closer to liberation, they think that their goal of life is to speak, just sing mantras. But if it doesn't make a small difference, then why would you even do it? And all these mantras, pilgrimages, scriptures, and rituals, normally in the average being, create a certain happiness. For example, the people can go to a temple or church, they feel so happy that they were there for an hour, and then their day is okay, like, oh, I had such a great day because I sang and I heard and then I read scriptures and I performed rituals, and people feel contentment in this. But the next day, seems that it is gone. And the reason why it is gone is because it wasn't well rooted, that it didn't have a meaning. If something really has a meaning for you, it doesn't just go away. But because it's all over the place in the air and it doesn't make sense, because most of, like 80% of our rituals are done just because, let alone reading scriptures, it makes a happy feeling because you simply make yourself feel happy. But you think that this is a scripture that made you happy, but in fact you just empowered your own feelings, and that is what you did. And you don't need any kind of object to empower your feelings. You can just create it by your own self. Just create a delightful sensation, not because you're the whole day and then you sit down and you feel better, but just because it is so. Then the next line, I am not the experienced nor the experience itself. Speaking of doership and the fruit of the action, if we were the experienced thing, for example, if we experience sadness, and if we really were that sadness that we experienced, that would be very problematic, because it would mean that we are those things that keep changing all the time, and there is no bliss for us then, because the moment it is gone, then we feel that we are done. Nor the experience itself. It is simply, there are two kinds of experiences. Experiential realities, in fact, two kinds of realities. Experiential and existential realities. So, for example, if we experience a great bliss within our body, but we don't leave the body through that bliss, it's an experiential reality. It means that we are in that reality, then we come out, and then we go to eat, and we have to sleep as well. So we come back to the survival in a way. So this is why they're experiential realities. Existential realities, on the other hand, are, for example, mahasamadhi, which means that you leave the body consciously. That is an existential reality, because your whole system was simply just transcended. It means that existentially you are that bliss. Bliss doesn't become your experience. Bliss becomes your existence. And this is why he says that I am not the experience. I'm not the bliss that I'm not, just the experiential bliss. I'm existentially that. Because experiential bliss, it might come, and if, things go on, you might not even remember that you have had that experience. But like this, if it's existential, it means that it doesn't change. Then he immediately gives the answer. If I am not the experienced nor the experience, then I am the form of consciousness and bliss, because I am existentially consciousness and bliss, not because I experience myself as bliss. Even beings that do not experience themselves as bliss are ultimately bliss too, because they are consciousness. It is just that there are some hindrances that doesn't allow them to see things as they are, but in reality they are also that same kind of bliss. And I am the eternal Shiva, again, realizing that there is only one kind of reality. Now let's move to the next stanza. Na me murti shanka, na me jati beda, pitane va mene va mata na janma, na bandur na mitram gurur ne va shishya, chidananda rupah shivo'ham. And in English it sounds, I have no fear of death, no caste or creed. I have no father, no mother, for I was never born. I'm not a relative, nor a friend, nor a teacher, nor a student. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. Now, this one is a very compact one, because there's a lot of interconnections in this one. I have no fear of death. This can be, in fact, taken with the first two verses. Right now will be taken together because it makes much more sense. I have no fear of death, no caste or creed. I have no father, no mother, for I was never born. So this never born nature of things, just simply knowing that this body came and it will go, but as the witness of things, as just the awareness of these things going on, that it is not born. It has always been there, because consciousness is never born. Bliss is never born. It means that it has always been there, but there was impurity that did not make us available to see all those things. But it does not mean that it was never there. So I have no fear of death. Simply, when someone becomes enlightened, which also means that at some point they might as well just leave the body consciously, it simply means that you know that there is no death awaiting you, because you will just leave the body consciously when you desire to do so. And also, if you don't get to the point when you can leave the body consciously, even then, why should there be a fear of death? As long as I know that I am the witness, the body just runs out of life energy, and this is the only thing that happens. Beyond that, I still witness, or can witness, all these functions that happen in the cycles of the creation, but it simply means that I was never born. Just because I felt that I was born in millions of bodies in millions of lifetimes, it does not mean that I was the one who was born. I was the one who witnessed the birth of the body. And just because I witnessed this body more than other bodies, I observe them more than the other bodies, it does not mean that the identity has to give them to the body. No caste or creed. So caste, especially in India, there are the 4 types of castes. But also, many times people mock India's caste system, but they do it as if it weren't present in the society of the West. Even here we have caste, because we say that those who have lesser money, those who are the aristocrats, or with other words, they have more money, much more money. So we also have these castes, but that we don't speak about them as castes, it's another thing, but it does not mean that they are not there. And for example, in India, if there are 2, beings from 2 different castes, let's say Brahmin, which is priests, and then there is householder, right? Those 2 castes are seen as obviously completely different. But if there are 2 students who go to a teacher, guru, a master, then their caste is over. At least this is how it was in ancient times. If you go to a guru, it means that you gave up your caste. Even if you were a priest, Brahmin, or you were a householder, or you were the lowest of the lowest of the lowest of the castes, if you go to a guru, the same guru, these 2, there are no more castes. So it is the same thing, for example, for which those who go and are under the guidance of a master have never been made, horoscopes, zodiac prophecies. Because if you are the guru, a master, it means that your energies are moved by that master, that your energies are changed by that master. It means that giving any kind of prophecy will be just speck of dust. It won't make a difference, because that guru, if they're a real guru and not just a modern guru, modern by the sense that they do not know, they just took it on like an identity, then your energies are already handled in a way by that teacher. So working on horoscopes like what you were born with has no meaning, because you have already gone. If you go to a guru, out of karma, you go beyond that you might not go beyond if you weren't going to that certain master. So this is why in India, only those who are not taking any kind of path of enlightenment are made such zodiacs and horoscopes, so that they might know what is up to them, like what are the diseases that can infect them most, or what are the all these things that you can see from the birth of a being and the place of birth, all these things. However, for those again who are on the path, such things are never made. So this is why, again, the castes are also just things that we imagine to be there. Initial castes are things that were made to make people, see their capabilities. If you had a lot of capabilities, you were a Brahmin, a priest's caste. If you had capabilities, but spiritual capabilities, but you were still somewhat in the world, then you were a warrior. So this is in fact just a successive chain of possibilities. It has never been like born into a caste. I mean, in flexible times at least. It was just like, oh, you had these possibilities in your life, then you certainly went to study with a guru. If you didn't have, then you went to be a householder, which can be also beautiful. If you do your dharma, your duty, then you will also gain some good karma, then which will lead you to greater possibilities, of course. Speaking about creed, that he speaks of here, no caste or creed, is that when we experience something, for example, this whole Shatakam, this whole art, is not coming out of any kind of belief system, any kind of creed. This is just pure experience of reality. The same that Buddha had, for example. He had no creed. In his time, people were very ritualistic. He could have had a lot of creed and belief in those rituals, but he said, no, I want to see how things really are. And so his teachings have never been any kind of religion. It is not a creed. It is a pure understanding of reality. And okay, if now philosophers come and they say that this is another kind of philosophy, but just because people don't see the difference between deep understanding and quoting scriptures, it is not because there isn't a difference. It is because people do not see that difference. I have no father, no mother. It is again because if I know that reality ultimately is this one thing, this body might have been helped by two other bodies to get an existence, this body, to get this form. But if I know that those two forms is also the form of consciousness and bliss, then why would I say, oh, this is my father, that is my mother, that is my relative, that is my friend? If everything fundamentally becomes the same reality for you, it has the same nature, then you would no longer go into things like, oh, father, mother. You might, of course, know in a sense that those are the biological parents of this body. But, the identity with the body was destroyed long at the beginning of the stanza. So in this sense, there is no father or mother to the self because it is self-existent. Consciousness and bliss do not have fathers and mothers. They are just self-existent. They do not need any kind of support so that they could exist. They are self-supportive, self-existent. I am not a relative, nor a friend, nor a teacher, nor a student. It is simply that when all these things were transcended, then why should I look at someone as a friend or a foe, a relative or not bloodline related being, a teacher or a student? These words have meanings in order to shun their meanings, in order to go beyond their meanings. So even as we spoke about it, words do not describe reality. These are references. And also because we know what a teacher, a guru means. We know what it means. But beyond that, when we become also enlightened, of course, we have reverence to that certain being that made us to get where we got. But beyond that, then those two beings are different, not different. They have the same nature, then why would we discriminate? This was the student, that is the master. Both of them are great masters, then we say. And then again, we say that I am the form of consciousness and bliss, I am the eternal Shiva. Because, you know, teacher, student, these are changing. So, for example, there are incarnations that come back as teacher and student, but not always the same as the teacher and the same the student. Many incarnations come like, right now, this one is the student that is a teacher, and then the next one, vice versa. And, you know, who is the teacher and who is the student? Then it depends on the lifetime. But if you look at the chain of lifetimes, you cannot tell. The same is with relatives. Right now, someone might be a relative. Next life, it might be just a cat. Or right now, someone might be a friend. It might have been a foe. It is just our present understanding of our social connections that we say that this is that and that. But, you know, why would I feel that someone is closer or less close when everything is the same, the form of consciousness and bliss? To understand this fundamental union of things, then why would I go on like, you are not my relative, you are not my friend, you are just a student? Such things come when we have identities and unclarity. Else, we might of course see that that being is a teacher for that other being, but it doesn't have to be something very powerfully expressed like, you see, I am the teacher, you are my student. If someone speaks like this, it means that their teacherhood is an identity, it's not something really there. Because in fact, you know, the student will always accept the teacher, and if the teacher runs after the student, then maybe the student has more to teach the teacher than the other way around. And then we get to the final stanza, which is the dot on the I. Aham nirvikalpo nirakara rupo vibhutvacha sarvatra sarvendriyanam nachasangatam neva muktir nameya chidananda rupam shivo'ham shivo'ham. And this means in English, I am devoid of duality. My form is formlessness. I exist everywhere, pervading all senses. I am neither attached, neither free, nor captive. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. Now, let us analyze this, because that is the last one, and this is really the conclusion of conclusions. I am devoid of duality. So we spoke about, you know, many times when duality arises, like in this word. Normally, what is it that we think that there is duality? Or the only way that we can have duality, it means that there are two things that are apparently different. And we spoke about this metaphor of the prism, which is just material that breaks the colorless light of the sun into the colors of the rainbow. This is what droplets in the atmosphere do when the rainbow is seen on the sky. So, is there duality in the rainbow colors? Yes, because they are different, so they are not the same. But are they not ultimately the same, in the sense that in fact they came from the same absolutely colorless light, and then there was medium that made them broke into many pieces. Now this medium that breaks the one thing into many things is the mind, what we call the unenlightened mind. Because then whatever is incident on this mind, with other words, whatever this mind perceives, it gives it a name, a form, an identity. So whenever there is duality, it means that there's something different. But we have spoken about the reality that ultimately nothing has any kind of quality. We might say that it's blue, it's green, but I also want to remind all of us that all our five senses, again, we might not even see the reality that is around us. We have eyes that have certain capabilities. We don't see ultraviolet light and infrared light, but they exist. It might mean that, in fact, if you looked at the sky and if you could see, in fact, ultraviolet, the sky would appear to be towards violet, and not towards blue. But this is not what we see. So, you know, how we see reality is, we can never be really sure that what we see is really what is there, because our five senses, although very subtle and very precise, they are not 100% precise. So, you know, we see things as with quality, but these qualities are given because we give these qualities existence. So when you close your eyes, when the night comes, nothing has color. For example, the impression of colors is not something that is always there. At night, it is not that we don't see the colors because it is dark and we cannot see. During the night, no object has any color, because colors happen when there's an object and there's a light that is incident on the object, and then the object absorbs and reflects certain wavelengths, the colors, and that which is reflected by the object, that is the color we see. But it means that it absorbs within itself all the other colors. So, you know, during night, there is no incident light, there are no colors. There's only just an unmanifested reality. And then when light happens, then it becomes manifested. But in absolute sense, nothing has really qualities. It is just that we measure the unmeasurable things that have certain appearances. Because as we said, when you go to sleep, the qualities of this world do not exist for you anymore. Simply because you do not perceive, you don't even observe this reality. When you go and fall asleep, you are dead for this world. For you, this world does not exist. And as I said in the previous videos, we continuously create this world by continuously observing it. When you do not observe an object, that object does not exist for you. And you might right now say that but for all the other ones who observe it, it still exists for them. Yes, that is true. But if nobody observed certain object, how could we know its existence? And in fact, we wouldn't know its existence. We would say that for us, it's ultimately not even there. And for example, the Buddha spoke about these planes of existences like animals, humans, hells, certain different heavens. And all these, if there is no being observing a certain plane of existence, it will simply cease to exist, because it means that there is no foundation, there's no basis, because we constantly create this world by witnessing it, by seeing it. If nobody looked at something ever again in this plane of existence, and not physically, because we would still be here, but if there weren't beings incarnated on this plane at all, nor beings who are bound to be incarnated here, this plane would just, boom, over. It wouldn't be anymore. And this is the proof that there are really no qualities. We make qualities out of things. If we're equanimous, we don't even care about qualities. We just look at things and we don't even make assumptions about them. We don't give them identities. So I'm devoid of duality simply means that there is no me and them. There is no this and that. There's only this and this. The same thing, the same empty nature of everything. And then I'm devoid of duality, because within myself, within consciousness, there is no separation. If you cut consciousness into two, you will still get consciousness. If you take existence and you would slice it into two parts, you wouldn't, after all, you're not even able to do such things. But mentally, we might say that you do this, but you cannot simply, if you cut into existence, it's still just existence. You cannot have two existences. Same is with bliss. If you cut bliss into two, it's just same bliss. There is no change. And this is why he says, I am devoid of duality, that there's no duality in me, likes and dislikes, or fear, or pleasure or pain. All these things are gone, because one has seen that ultimately things have the same empty nature. What sometimes, so what we refer to as the self is what the Buddha called Buddha nature. That thing which is always there, which cannot be taken away, even if you are sitting on the depths, in the depths of hell. Even then, you have the possibility to become enlightened. My form is formlessness, is simply just switching the observation, switching the perceiving from the form to formlessness, that there is in fact no form in me, because consciousness is absolutely formless. This is absolutely formless, that these things are beyond object verbs. And then my form, what is called my being, my form, is also simply just formless existence, because I am the form of consciousness and bliss, as he at the end affirms. And then I exist everywhere, pervading all senses. So, as Shiva said, one who is omnipresent is joyous. What this simply means is that if I pervade all senses, it means that I do not have any kind of sense of sense, if it makes sense. It means that I do not experience any kind of sensual bondage. I do not experience that I'm seeing, because if I feel that I see, I don't experience as existing everywhere, because I feel that I witness something, and what witnesses that certain object is what I am. This is what the experience is then. And if I say I exist everywhere, it can be if I pervade all senses, which means that all senses are really turned off in me. Like, I know that this seeing just happens, but I know that I am not the one who sees. I simply cease to see. I simply just witness how this seeing happens. Or I witness how I, move my hand, or as I speak. I need not to feel that I'm the one who speaks, as we have spoken about it with respect to Dharma. I am neither attached, neither free nor captive. Now, obviously, we know that we are not this body, not this mind, and that we are beyond 5 elements and all the sheets of consciousness. So we are certainly not attached. Now he says neither free nor captive. Again, as I said, we get to a point when we see that freedom and bondage are relative to each other. You can be free. If you speak about your freedom, it means that right now you don't feel free. If you speak about your bondage, it is with respect to a state of consciousness that was freer than this one right now. So freedom and bondage are relative to each other. So when we speak about mukti or moksha, absolute liberation, it simply means that you are free even from your freedom. This is where, this is when they say that words cannot express, that we cannot even speak of it. Of course, we cannot speak about reality because words are not real, but beyond that, it doesn't even get to the point where it could even refer to it. Here, we cannot even refer to absolute freedom, because freedom is, again, relative to bondage. But if something was ever free, like a bird which has never been put into a cage, and then they just know that freedom, that they are not, that they are free. They don't start to think like, I'm not captive or I'm not attached, because things like, well, I'm not bound, it simply arises if you have ever been bound. If you have never been bound and you have never known attachment, then why would you even think in terms of freedom and bondage? These things are used as just direction that you want to be free even from your own freedom, that you want to get free from yourself, from your free choice, from your karma, from your all the things that can possibly be. You want to just get rid of them, and then when you get neither attached nor free nor captive, then you are the form of consciousness and bliss, because then you are the eternal Shiva. So this is a way to analyze the Nirvana Shatakam. So as just giving a small summary of it, in the 6 stanzas, the very beginning we start with gross elements of human existence as memory, ego, intellect, or the mind, and the 5 senses. Then we go towards breadth, like, dislike, vice and virtue, and then we go further and further. Then it becomes so subtle that the only thing that we can say is that I'm devoid of duality. Like before, he's expressed, I don't have pleasure or pain. I have no virtues or vices. At the end, as we get to this very subtle point, he says, I'm devoid of duality. This is why I said that this is the dot on the I, because here, in this one stanza, in this one strophe, he simply says, I'm devoid of duality. My form is formlessness. I exist everywhere because I pervade all the senses. It means that senses don't mean a thing for me anymore. I'm not free nor bound because I know that I'm even free from my own freedom and my own bondage, so I cannot be any of these. And then the positive connection back to the reality is that I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am the eternal Shiva. In fact, why it was very important at his time to speak about this positive affirmation, like I am this, not about the negative, is because most of the paths, most of the beings who were before him, I mean, many have spoken about this positive as well, but he was the one who brought it back. So after the advent of the Buddha, he spoke about in negative terms, in the way that I'm neither this nor this nor this nor this. When he says there's no self, he very much just ended the whole, that was the very powerful, that is one pillar of the teachings of his, that, for example, there is no kind of identity, there's no kind of I-ness of things. And it is very good that he said so. But what Shankara did, who came after him in several thousand years later, he says that, in fact, there is a positive way to express reality, the chidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. These are not negated terms. These are positive terms because they are not negative. And then we can know reality also from a positive reasoning. So yesterday we spoke about negative reasoning and about reasoning in general. And there are this negative reasoning saying all those things that we remove, like I'm not this, I'm not this. And then there is this positive that, in fact, that is what alone is. So again, this has to be understood that when he says, I am the eternal Shiva, or when he says, I am the form of consciousness and bliss, these are not identities, because identities are very superficial. This is the bottom line of the experiences, because here the I am simply means Satchitananda, because even if I say the word I am, let's look at this a bit. If I say I am, the word am obviously means existence. If I say I, it means that I'm conscious of, I'm aware of existence. The awareness of existence is what we would call the I. So in fact, I am is existence and consciousness, and why is I am bliss is simply the fact that you can realize your own existence, that you can see, you can say that I am, or with other words, there is existence. If you understand how it is blissful to say that I am existent, like, why is it that nothing really exists? Not even a capital self, what is referred to as eternal Shiva in the Nirvana Shatakam. Why is it that nothing really exists and every, like, period, like nothing is? And the answer is not correct. The question is in fact not correct, because we want to find a point in existence, like why does existence exist? There is no point in existence. Existence is to be. There is no reason for existence to exist. The same with consciousness and bliss. So whenever he says, I am this or I am that, it has to be understood that, in fact, that only thing exists, which is the self. And of course, there is no I in things, and an enlightened being understands why there is no I in things. But since this is the only way to express it, that I am that, and that is the only possible way to express, if you want to use positive terms, of course. Or the other way that it can be expressed is that all the beings possess the Buddha nature, and that is also a positive way. And the Buddha also, of course, used this as well, that there is a fundamental Buddha nature in all beings. And you know, many Buddhists who don't really know the teachings of the Buddha say that even dharmas are changing. If dharmas, which are ultimate truths, are changing, it means that there is no mukti, because it means that something is wholesome now, and in 2 minutes later, in 2 minutes, it is no more wholesome. Like, it would be a big mess. So there are those things that are changing, and the Buddha spoke about them very well, but there are the unchanging elements of Buddhism, of the teachings of Buddha, which are, for example, that of Nirvana. Nirvana doesn't change. And also that of Buddha nature. Simply, even if a being is full with karma, with every possible thing that you can have karma, it has karma and it's very severe. Even if they are on the bottom of the most painful hell, which is in fact called avicii in the Buddhist scriptures, I mean, that is the one of the most powerful hells. Even if it's there, it still cannot lose its Buddha nature. It's very important to understand this. No matter in what consciousness, no matter in what plane of existence, no matter with how severe karma, the Buddha nature of a being simply cannot be taken away. And there are not even schools that would doubt this. And this is from what, for example, compassion has to come. That we understand that the suffering of other beings comes from their karma, their illusions, but ultimately they do have the possibility of Buddha nature, that they become enlightened beings. That simply cannot be taken away by anyone or anything, any kind of action. And so what he spoke of as the Buddha nature is what we refer to as the self. And I made this parenthesis here, because many times those who follow the path of Buddha and those who follow the path of Advaita Vedanta, which is absolute non-dualism, think that the other one is somewhat messed up. But this is because we don't understand. And just because there are several terms used to the same thing, we should not be bewitched by the multitude of words, as we have spoken about it. Words anyway do not describe a thing. So if I want to speak about the self, and another being wants to speak about the Buddha nature, it's not the words that express our reality. If I start to speak about my experience, about the self as pure existence, pure consciousness, and pure bliss, then they themselves will see, because the Buddha has never gone against this. Because consciousness, well, it's obvious that even when the Buddha leaves the body, and which means Mahaparinirvana, which is Mahasamadhi in the yogic terms, there is an awareness. So the awareness, the consciousness, is never lost. Bliss, well, the Buddha himself said that bliss, nirvana, is the greatest bliss. And existence, Buddha has, disproved relative existence, that there is a dependent origination. Whatever exists in this world has a dependent origination of source on something else that existed before it. And this is very correct. But when we speak about existence as pure existence, it simply means when you are the witness, when there's only just witnessing, when there are not just objects, like not object connected existence, like the existence of that man or the existence of this phenomena. It is just existence, like just that things are, not like how they are or what they are. The simple fact that there is awareness, the possibility of awareness, that there is existence that consciousness exists, that bliss exists. These were never disproven by the Buddha. Only that, the negation of the self is a very powerful pillar. These things were not gone into too deeply. I mean, they were, but modern Buddhists don't always give their experience, so they do not always just go into this part, because you might not even know what Buddha nature is, and you might not even know about all these things, but you still can get enlightened. So there's not need to go deeply into such things. But if we have the chance to show that there are two things that are fundamentally are not different, namely the Buddha nature and that self what we speak of, then why should not we make peace and understanding between two paths that are ultimately not different? So if there are any kind of questions about this speech, the Nirvana Shatakam, or Buddha nature and self, then please feel free. And if not, then thank you very much for listening.